Captain Jake Morrison had been dreaming about his daughter's birthday party when the universe changed forever. The International Space Station rotated peacefully through its orbit, coffee floating in perfect spheres around the observation deck, where Jake conducted his morning ritual, watching Earth wake up beneath him. The blue marble looked so peaceful from up here, so innocent. I had no idea he was about to witness the beginning of humanity's greatest test. The proximity alarms didn't just sound, they screamed like banshees from hell. Jake's coffee mug exploded against the command deck floor as his body jerked in zero gravity. Red warning lights bathed everything in hellish crimson while the computer's voice announced,
What his eyes couldn't quite process. Unknown contacts. Multiple signatures.
massive displacement readings that broke every scale they had. Through the reinforced observation window, space itself seemed to tear open. One moment there was nothing but stars and the familiar dance of satellites. The next moment, shadow black ships materialized from empty space like nightmares becoming real. These weren't the sleek vessels of science fiction movies. These were brutal, angular monsters that looked like they'd been forged in the fires of war itself. Their hulls bristled with weapons that pulsed with an ominous red glow, each pulse synchronized like a massive heartbeat of death. "Houston, we have a problem," Jake whispered into his comm, his voice barely steady. His hands shook as he tried to count the vessels. Unknown vessels. Jesus Christ, they are the size of cities. The largest ship stretched for miles, its bulk blotting out entire constellations. How had something that massive approached without being detected? What kind of technology could hide objects larger than Manhattan? Back on Earth, General Marcus Stone was having the worst morning of his career. The Pentagon's Situation Room had erupted into controlled chaos as radar operators shouted readings that made no sense. Stone, a veteran of 3 wars and countless classified operations, had never seen his people this terrified. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he couldn't remember the last time he'd taken a sip. How many? He barked at the trembling technician, whose face had gone pale as milk. The young man's hands shook as he tried to make sense of the impossible data streaming across his screens. 17 confirmed, sir. More appearing every minute. They're positioning over a major population. Centers. The technician's voice cracked like a teenager's. Sir, these readings. They're showing power signatures that our equipment can't fully measure. Whatever these things are, they're operating on technology we don't understand. Stone felt ice water flowed through his veins. In 40 years of military service, he'd never encountered a threat that made him feel this helpless. The ships weren't just large, they were strategically positioned. New York, Los Angeles, London, Tokyo, Moscow. Every major city on Earth had a shadow falling across it. This wasn't random. This was planned. This was an invasion. The first energy beam changed everything. It lanced down from the lead ship like the finger of an angry god, a column of pure destruction that seemed to bend the very air around it. Downtown Los Angeles simply ceased to exist. One moment, millions of people were starting their day, stuck, in traffic, grabbing coffee, arguing with their kids about homework. The next moment, a square mile of the city was nothing but a perfectly smooth crater filled with glass that still glowed with residual energy. 20 million people watched in horror as their televisions, smartphones, and emergency broadcast systems activated simultaneously. The alien broadcast began with a sound like grinding metal, followed by a mechanical voice speaking perfect English with cold precision that made every human listening feel like insects under a microscope. Humans of Earth, you have been selected. For harvesting resistance is futile, your species designation primitive, your fate absorption into the collective. The voice paused, and somehow that silence was more terrifying than the words themselves. You have 72 hours to prepare for processing. Do not attempt to flee. Do not attempt to fight. Your technology is insufficient. Your courage is irrelevant. You will be cataloged, studied, and incorporated. But you know what's funny about humans? We've never been particularly good at following directions, especially when someone tells us we're primitive. Dr. Emily Carter, watching from her laboratory beneath NORAD, felt ice form in her veins as she processed the scanner data. The readings were impossible. These ships operated on technology centuries beyond human capability. Their power sources alone generated more energy than the entire North American electrical grid. Their weapon systems showed quantum signatures. That shouldn't exist according to current physics. Yet as she watched the scanner data, something else caught her attention. The aliens had made one critical error. They had studied human technology, analyzed our weapons, calculated our industrial capacity. They had measured everything except the one thing that mattered most. They had underestimated human rage. That rage was already building, spreading across the planet like wildfire, turning fear into fury and desperation into determination. The aliens called humans primitive, but they were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one with nothing left to lose, the one who refuses to go quietly into the night, the one who looks at impossible odds and says, "Watch me." Speaking of impossible odds, have you ever wondered how small actions can compound into massive results? Just like how humanity's refusal to surrender would soon compound into the greatest military evolution in galactic history. There's incredible power in understanding how small investments of effort can grow into life-changing outcomes. Check out my next video on the power of compounding. It might just change how you think about building your future. One small step at a time. The nuclear strike against the Chicago mothership lit up the night sky like a second sun, turning darkness into blazing daylight for 300 miles in every direction. Colonel Derek Washington pressed his binoculars against his eyes so hard they left marks on his face, watching as the massive alien vessel shuddered under the atomic assault. For the first time since the invasion began, the enemy's shields flickered like a dying light bulb. "Target is damaged but still operational," he reported into his radio, his voice carrying a mix of exhaustion and something humanity hadn't felt in weeks. "Hope. Repeat, the bastards can be hurt." Those 5 words spread across military channels faster than the shockwave from the nuclear blast. After 72 hours of watching humanity's finest weapons bounce off alien hulls like rubber balls, they finally had proof that these invaders weren't gods. They were just aliens with really good technology. But here's the thing about hope. It's the most dangerous weapon humans possess. It makes us do impossible things like charge into battle against enemies that should obliterate us. And that's exactly what was happening across every battlefield on Earth, 3,000 miles away. Sergeant Lisa Brooks was learning that lesson firsthand. She led her squad through the wreckage of downtown Detroit, where the skyline now looked like broken teeth against a smoke-filled sky. The Renaissance Center had been split in half by an alien energy beam, its twisted steel and glass creating a maze of death traps and hiding spots. Her modified rifles hummed with experimental plasma cells that had been reverse-engineered from crashed alien drones technology that didn't exist a week ago, now mass-produced in underground factories that worked around the clock. The squad moved like ghosts through the rubble, their boots crunching on glass and debris. Lisa's heart hammered against her ribs as she checked corners and cleared rooms. Every shadow could hide death. Every sound could be their last warning. Then it happened, the moment that would define the rest of the war. The towering collective. Warrior rounded the corner like something from humanity's darkest nightmares. 8 feet of chitinous armor that looked like it had been forged from black diamonds, razor-sharp claws that could slice through steel, and eyes that glowed with the cold intelligence of a species that had conquered half the galaxy. It moved with fluid grace despite its massive size, each step calculating and precise. Lisa didn't hesitate. She didn't freeze. She didn't run. Instead, she did something that would have made her drill sergeants proud and her mother terrified. "Light him. Up!" she screamed, her voice cutting through the chaos like a battle cry from ancient warriors. The plasma bolts erupted from 5 rifles simultaneously, creating a light show that would have been beautiful if it weren't so deadly. The experimental weapons tore through alien armor like paper, sending fragments of chitinous plating flying in every direction. The creature's death shriek echoed through the ruins, not the mechanical sound they expected, but something organic and filled with pain. Green blood pooled beneath its massive form as it collapsed, twitching once before going still. Lisa stared at the fallen alien, her chest heaving with adrenaline and disbelief. "Holy shit," she whispered. "We actually killed one of these things." Her squad gathered around the corpse, their weapons still smoking. For the first time since the invasion began, they were looking at a dead alien instead of dead humans. Meanwhile, in underground bunkers worldwide, brilliant minds were working feverishly to turn that small victory into a larger advantage. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Professor Robert Hayes hadn't slept in 72 hours. His laboratory looked like a tornado had hit it, alien technology scattered across every surface. Coffee cups forming archaeological layers of exhaustion, and whiteboards covered in equations that would have made Einstein jealous. Hayes held a fragment of alien circuitry up to the light, his hands shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. Each breakthrough brought them closer to understanding their enemy's weaknesses, but every answer raised 10 new questions. How did they achieve faster-than-light travel? What powered their weapons? Why did their technology seem to violate half? The laws of physics. The power source, he muttered, examining the fragment under a microscope. It's quantum-based, but unstable. If we can create a resonance cascade. His voice trailed off as the implications hit him. The aliens' greatest strength might also be their greatest weakness. Their technology was so advanced that it relied on quantum states that could be disrupted with the right frequency. You know what's fascinating about human ingenuity? We've always been masters at taking someone else's invention and making it better. We didn't invent gunpowder, but we perfected guns. We didn't discover electricity, but we figured out how to power cities with it. Now we were doing the same thing with alien technology, except this time the stakes weren't just progress, they were survival. The tide was turning, but not in the way anyone expected. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology. It was their absolute refusal to surrender. While other species in the galaxy had submitted to the collective after-token resistance, humans responded to invasion with something the aliens had never encountered: pure, unadulterated rage mixed with stubborn determination. In bunkers across the world, engineers were retrofitting human weapons with alien technology. Factories that had been producing cars last week were now churning out plasma rifles. Scientists who had been studying theoretical physics were now creating weapons that bent the laws of reality. The entire human race had become a military-industrial complex focused on one goal: making the aliens regret ever hearing about Earth. But the real turning point wasn't the technology, it was the attitude. Every human who survived an alien attack, every soldier who took down an enemy warrior, every scientist who cracked another piece of alien technology was proving the same thing. The collective had made a fatal error in judgment. They had assumed that primitive meant weak. They were about to learn the difference between primitive and dangerous. The awakening had begun, and it was spreading faster than any alien weapon could stop it. From the ruins of Detroit to the laboratories beneath NORAD, humanity was discovering something about itself that would reshape the galaxy forever. We weren't just another species to be cataloged and absorbed. We were the species that looked at impossible odds and said, "Hold my beer." Speaking of turning disadvantages into advantages, the power of compounding works the same way in your personal life. Small, consistent actions can create massive results over time, just like how humanity's small victories were compounding into a force that would challenge the greatest empire in galactic history. Check out my next video to discover how you can harness this same principle to build wealth, skills, and success that grows exponentially over time. 6 months after first contact, the human resistance had transformed into something the aliens never anticipated. A force that combined human creativity with alien technology in ways that defied every military doctrine in the galaxy. Captain Amanda Phillips gripped the controls of her fighter, a sleek hybrid of human engineering and captured alien tech that would have been impossible to build just half a year ago. The cockpit hummed with energy signatures that made her teeth ache, but she'd learned to ignore the discomfort. Pain was just another reminder that she was alive while her enemies were about to be very, very dead. "Phoenix Squadron, this is Phoenix." "Leader," she called out, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. The debris field above New York looked like a graveyard of civilizations, twisted metal from both human and alien ships, creating a deadly maze that stretched for miles. "We've got 3 enemy cruisers incoming. Remember, hit the quantum cores and get out." Her squadron acknowledged with brief clicks over the com. They'd learned to keep radio chatter minimal during combat. The aliens had gotten better at jamming human communications, but they still couldn't predict human tactics. The battle was brutal in a way that made old war movies look like children's games. Alien fighters swarmed like angry hornets, their weapons turning space into a deadly light show of energy beams and plasma bursts. Each alien pilot had decades of experience and technology that should have made them unstoppable. Had learned to fight dirty using tactics no civilized species would consider. You see?
Ow.
While other galactic species fought with honor and followed established military protocols, humans had discovered something beautiful about combat. There are no rules when your species is facing extinction. Amanda rolled her fighter into a maneuver that would have been impossible 6 months ago, using the ship's hybrid systems to create a sensor ghost that fooled alien targeting computers. The enemy cruiser's massive guns swiveled toward empty space while she lined up her shot. "Fox 2, Fox 2. Lieutenant Tom Bradley's voice crackled through the com as his modified missiles locked onto alien hulls. These weren't the crude rockets that humanity had used in the early days of the war. These were quantum-tipped warheads that could punch through alien shields by temporarily existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The explosions that followed sent shockwaves through the enemy formation, turning their perfect military geometry into chaotic, scattered fragments. Bradley's fighter screamed past a dying alien cruiser, its hull peeling away like flower petals in a hurricane. "That's what I'm talking about," he shouted over the com. "These quantum tips are like giving a caveman a machine gun." Comparison wasn't far off. Humanity had gone from stone knives to energy weapons in 6 months, skipping about 10,000 years of normal technological development. But the real evolution wasn't happening in space. It was happening on the ground, where human soldiers had learned to combine ancient military tactics with alien technology in ways that made their enemies. Strategic computers crashed from pure confusion. Major Chris Thompson led the assault on the alien processing center outside Las Vegas, his soldiers moving with lethal precision through the facility's corridors. Their power armor had been reverse-engineered from captured collective technology, but with distinctly human modifications. Where alien armor prioritized protection and energy efficiency, human engineers had added redundant systems, explosive charges, and what Thompson liked to call aggressive personality features. "Remember," he growled into his helmet mic, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made men follow him into hell. "These things tried to turn us into cattle." "Show them what happens when you mess with the human race," his soldiers responded. With grim determination, their weapons charged and ready. Each man and woman in his unit had lost friends, family, or entire cities to the alien invasion. This wasn't just warfare, it was personal. The facility fell in 2 hours. But those 2 hours contained enough violence to fuel nightmares for decades. Human soldiers moved through alien corridors like ghosts of vengeance, their weapons adapted to exploit every weakness they discovered about collective technology. They used the aliens' own quantum computers against them, turning security systems into weapons and communication networks into traps. When Thompson's team breached the inner sanctum, they found something that changed the entire war. The horror chambers, where aliens had been experimenting on captured humans, stretched for hundreds of yards underground. Stasis pods containing people from every walk of life, teachers, doctors, children, grandparents, all being studied like laboratory specimens. The aliens had been cataloging human biology, behavior, and psychology with the cold efficiency of scientists dissecting insects. Thompson stared at a pod containing a little girl who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her eyes were closed, but monitoring equipment showed she was conscious, aware of everything happening to her. The rage that followed didn't just fuel Thompson's squad. It spread through every human military unit on Earth like wildfire. Word of the horror chambers reached every bunker, every resistance cell, every underground factory where humans were building weapons of war. You know what's terrifying about human anger? It's not the explosive kind that burns out quickly. It's the cold, calculating fury that builds systems, creates technologies, and plans revenge on a scale that spans generations. The aliens had made the mistake of showing humanity exactly why. They needed to be stopped, and humans responded by becoming the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The processing center's destruction sent a message that reached every collective outpost within 50 light years. The message was simple. Humans weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for revenge, and they were getting very good at it. The species that had been designated as primitive 6 months ago was now fielding weapons that made collective generals lose sleep. But this was just the beginning. The real evolution wasn't in humanity's technology, it was in their thinking. They'd learned to fight like apex predators, to adapt like viruses, and to innovate like their lives depended on it. Because they did. The aliens had awakened something in humanity that had been dormant since the days when humans fought. Saber-toothed tigers with sharpened sticks. The processing center's fall marked the end of humanity's defensive phase. The aliens had spent 6 months trying to harvest Earth's population. But they had only succeeded in teaching humans how to harvest alien technology. Now the hunters were about to become the hunted, and the galaxy was about to learn why humans had conquered their own planet long before they reached for the stars. Just like humanity's rapid evolution in warfare, the power of compounding can transform your life in ways you never imagined. Small, consistent improvements compound into massive advantages over time. Check out my next video to discover how you can apply this same principle to build wealth skills and success that grows exponentially, turning your own limitations into unstoppable momentum. Admiral Jessica Grant stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, humanity's first true starship, and felt the weight of an entire species resting on her shoulders. The bridge hummed with energy from systems that hadn't existed a year ago. Quantum computers processing targeting data, gravitational field generators that bent space-time itself, and weapons that could crack planets in half. But what made her most proud wasn't the alien technology they'd reverse-engineered. It was the purely human modifications her engineers had added, the improvements that made alien scientists shake their heads in disbelief. Around her, the combined human fleet prepared for the impossible, a direct assault on the collective's main staging area in the Alpha Centauri system. 30 ships that represented everything humanity had learned about warfare, technology, and pure stubborn determination. Each vessel was a testament to human ingenuity. It's built in underground shipyards that had been excavated from asteroid mines and powered by fusion reactors that pushed the boundaries of known physics. The fleet looked like nothing the galaxy had. Ever seen human ships didn't follow the elegant curves and perfect symmetries that other species preferred? They were angular, aggressive, and covered in weapons that violated every treaty the collective had ever signed. Where alien vessels were built for efficiency and long-term operation, human ships were built for one purpose: to hurt their enemies as badly as possible before going down fighting. All vessels, this is Admiral Grant, she announced, her voice carrying across 30 ships through quantum communication arrays that made faster-than-light coordination possible. Today, we take the fight to them. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when you underestimate humanity. Her words reached every captain, every gunner, every engineer who had volunteered for what military analysts called a suicide mission. The immediate odds were impossible. The enemy had superior numbers, better technology, and centuries of experience conquering civilizations. But here's what the collective hadn't counted on. Humans had never been particularly good at accepting impossible odds. When faced with extinction, they didn't calculate probabilities or negotiate surrender terms. They got angry, and angry humans were the most dangerous force in the known universe. The battle was like nothing the universe had ever seen. Human ships, outnumbered 10-1, fought with desperate fury that made collective commanders question their own tactical computers. The engagement began with a coordinated strike that should have been impossible to execute. 30 human vessels moving in perfect synchronization. They're quantum-linked. Computers allowing them to fight as a single organism with 30 different weapon systems. Captain Mike Rodriguez commanded the destroyer Wolverine, weaving through alien fire with impossible skill. His ship danced between energy beams that could vaporize cities, using gravitational fields to bend their trajectory at the last second. The Wolverine's hull was scarred from a dozen previous battles, but Rodriguez had learned to use those scars as advantages, creating sensor shadows that confused alien targeting systems. Multiple contacts, bearing 37 Marks II, his tactical officer reported. 3 heavy cruisers and a dreadnought, closing fast. The alien dreadnought was the size of a small moon, its weapons systems capable of sterilizing entire continents. Against any other species, it would have been game over. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Well, boys, looks like we found our dance partner. He studied the tactical display, calculating vectors and possibilities. The Wolverine was fast, but not fast enough to outrun a dreadnought. They were too far from the main fleet to call for support. By every logical measure, they were about to die. That's when Rodriguez made a decision that would be studied in military academies for the next 1,000 years. All power to forward shields, he ordered, ramming speed. The Wolverine's engines screamed as they pushed past their safety limits, creating a trail of superheated plasma that stretched for miles behind them. The ship accelerated toward the massive alien dreadnought like a bullet fired from the hand of God himself. Rodriguez's crew didn't question the order. They'd learned to trust their captain's instincts. Even when those instincts seemed completely insane, the collision sent nuclear fire across space. An explosion so bright it was visible from Earth 4 light-years away. Both vessels disappeared in a blaze of glory that temporarily created a new star in the Alpha Centauri system. The Wolverine's sacrifice took out not just the dreadnought, but 2 of the heavy cruisers that had been using it as cover. But Rodriguez wasn't the only captain making impossible choices. Across the battlefield, human commanders were rewriting the rules of space combat. They used their ships as weapons, their damaged vessels as decoys, and their desperation as a tactical advantage. When conventional weapons failed, they rammed enemy ships. When their shields collapsed, they used their hulls as battering rams. When their crews were dying, they set their reactors to overload and took their enemies with them. You know what's beautiful about human warfare? We've never fought fair, and we're not about to start now. Other species in the galaxy followed honor codes and military protocols. Humans treated every battle like a bar fight, where the winner was whoever was still standing at the end. But for every human ship lost, 2 alien vessels fell. The collective had never faced an enemy that fought with such savage determination. Their calculated strategies, perfected over centuries of conquest, crumbled against human unpredictability. How do you plan for an enemy that uses damaged ships as weapons? How do you counter tactics that violate every principle of civilized warfare? The answer was simple. You don't. The collective's tactical computers began overheating as they tried to process combat data that didn't fit any known patterns. Their perfect formations dissolved into chaos as human ships attacked from impossible angles, used gravity wells as weapons, coordinated strikes that should have required telepathic communication. Admiral Grant watched the battle unfold from the Defiance's bridge, her heart pounding with pride and terror. They were winning, but the cost was enormous. Every human ship destroyed represented hundreds of lives, thousands of stories, entire families that would never see their loved ones again. But they were also proving something that would echo through galactic history. Humanity would not go quietly into extinction. When the smoke cleared, the alien fleet was in full retreat. Massive collective warships that had never run from a fight were jumping to hyperspace as fast as their engines could carry them. The staging area that had been used to coordinate attacks on dozens of star systems was now a debris field of twisted metal and cooling plasma. Humanity had achieved the impossible. They had driven back a force that had conquered half the galaxy, using nothing but modified technology, impossible tactics, and the kind of stubborn determination that made other species wonder if humans were completely insane. The answer, of course, was yes. But that insanity was exactly what made them so dangerous. The victory at Alpha Centauri sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Species that had surrendered to the collective without a fight began to reconsider their positions. Civilizations that had been marked for harvesting started asking themselves a simple question. If the primitive humans could fight back, why couldn't they? Just like humanity's compound advantages in warfare, the power of compounding can transform your own life in ways you never imagined. Small, consistent actions build into unstoppable momentum over time. Check out my next video to discover how you can harness this same principle to build wealth. It's a success that grows exponentially, turning your own limitations into your greatest strengths. 1 year later, President Kevin Walker stood before the United Nations. But the mahogany podium that had once addressed only Earth's nations now commanded an audience that spanned the galaxy. Holographic projections flickered to life around the assembly hall, showing delegates from 17 different alien species, all seeking alliance with the upstart humans who had rewritten the rules of galactic warfare. The same species that had once watched Earth's invasion like a mildly interesting nature documentary were now desperately trying to get humanity's attention. Walker adjusted his tie, a simple human gesture that had become a symbol of defiance, across known space. Alien species that had worn elaborate ceremonial armor for thousands of years were now adopting human business attire for diplomatic meetings. Something about the simplicity of human clothing had become associated with the kind of practical efficiency that won wars. The collective thought we were primitive, Walker declared, his voice carrying to every corner of known space through quantum communication networks that had been built in underground bunkers just 18 months ago. They learned otherwise. Now we extend our hand to any species willing to stand against tyranny. The words echoed through council chambers on worlds that had never heard of humans before the invasion, but now spoke of them in whispers of hope. In terror, the transformation was staggering. Earth had gone from an isolated backwater planet to the most feared military power in the galaxy, and everyone wanted to know their secret. The answer was both simple and terrifying. Humans had discovered that the most dangerous enemy wasn't the one with the best technology. It was the one with nothing left to lose. Ambassador Sarah Mitchell, humanity's first representative to the Galactic Council, smiled as she watched former enemies now seek human protection. The council chambers on the neutral world of Nexus Prime had been redesigned to accommodate human delegates. With gravity generators adjusted to Earth normal and atmosphere processors that could handle the oxygen levels humans needed, the species that had once dismissed Earth as barely civilized now begged for human military advisors. Ambassador Mitchell, Zephyrian delegate, approached with what humans had learned was their species' equivalent of nervous excitement. My government wishes to formally request a mutual defense treaty with Earth. We can offer mining rights. 217 star systems in exchange for protection from collective remnants. Mitchell nodded diplomatically, but inside she was amazed. The Zephyrians had spacefaring technology when humans were still figuring out agriculture. Now they were offering to give away entire star systems just to have human soldiers stationed in their territory. The power dynamic had shifted so dramatically that it felt like living in a dream. But the real proof of humanity's new position wasn't happening in council chambers or diplomatic meetings. It was happening in the Outer Rim, where human warships patrolled borders that had been drawn by species that were now extinct or scattered. Commander Daniel Foster stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Retribution, watching sensor displays that showed the vast emptiness between star systems. His mixed crew of humans and aliens worked together with lethal efficiency, hunting down the last collective holdouts like wolves tracking wounded prey. The Retribution itself was a testament to how far humanity had come, built in orbital shipyards that hadn't existed 2 years ago, powered by fusion reactors that pushed the boundaries of known physics, and armed with weapons that made collective dreadnoughts look like toys. But what made Foster most proud wasn't the technology, it was the crew. Contact bearing 27 Mark V, his alien tactical officer reported. Lieutenant Kextar was a Voltarian who had lost his entire family to the collective species, had surrendered without a fight. Kextar had chosen to serve aboard human vessels because he'd learned that humans didn't surrender, ever. As a collective harvester, running silent and trying to avoid detection. Foster studied the tactical display. The Harvester was probably full of captured civilians from some Outer Rim colony, beings who were about to be processed into raw materials for the Collective's war machine. 6 months ago, the smart military decision would have been to report the contact and wait for reinforcements. But humans had learned that sometimes the right thing to do was also the crazy thing to do. All batteries, open fire, Foster commanded. Let's remind them why they should have left us alone. The Retribution's weapon systems came alive with deadly precision. Quantum torpedoes that could punch through any known armor, energy beams, that operated on principles that violated 3 different laws of physics, and missiles that could track their targets through hyperspace itself. The Collective Harvester never had a chance. You know what's funny about becoming a galactic superpower? Everyone assumes you had a master plan. The truth was, humanity had stumbled into galactic dominance by doing what they'd always done, refusing to quit when any sane species would have surrendered. The Collective had spent centuries perfecting the art of conquest. But they'd never encountered a species that treated impossible odds as a personal challenge. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Never underestimate a species with nothing left to lose. Humanity had gone from primitive backwater to galactic superpower in less than 2 years, and they were just getting started. Human colonies were spreading across the galaxy like wildfire, each one a fortress that could defend itself and launch attacks on collective positions. Human technology was advancing so rapidly that weapon systems became obsolete before they could be mass-produced. But the real change wasn't in humanity's technology or military might. It was in how they thought about the universe. Where other species saw vast emptiness between stars, humans saw opportunities for expansion. Where other civilizations saw the Collective as an unstoppable force of nature, humans saw them as a problem to be solved. Where most species accepted their place in the galactic hierarchy, humans decided to rewrite the hierarchy entirely. The age of human expansion had begun, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humans didn't just conquer territory, they transformed it. They didn't just defeat enemies, they turned them into allies. They didn't just survive extinction. They used it as motivation to become the most dangerous species in known space. The Collective had made one critical error in their calculations. They had assumed that primitive meant weak. They had confused technological advancement with evolutionary fitness. They had forgotten that the most successful species in any ecosystem weren't the ones with the best equipment. They were the ones who could adapt, overcome, and thrive in any environment. Humanity was about to prove that point across an entire galaxy. The species that had once huddled in caves while saber-toothed tigers hunted them was now hunting the galaxy's apex predators. The beings who had learned to survive ice ages and asteroid impacts were now teaching other civilizations how to fight back against extinction, and this was just the beginning. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you gave human starships alien technology. And a really good reason to be angry. Just like humanity's rapid rise from primitive to galactic superpower. The power of compounding can transform your life in ways you never imagined. Small, consistent actions build into unstoppable momentum over time. Check out my next video to discover how you can harness this same principle to build wealth and success that grows exponentially, turning your own limitations into your greatest strengths.